or at least 5 minutes until the open. But
good morning, Facebook.
Good morning, guys. So you have more than one Wi-Fi here? I'm connected to one that don't have much of a signal.
yeah, it should be. Let me find the password. HCR.
It's 2. Wi-Fi
Yeah,
2.
that's one you want to be on. And the password for that, so everyone on Facebook can hear. Let me find it.
I don't think we have any viewers yet, so we're safe.
Yeah,
Let's see.
we're not popular anymore.
Okay. That's the password highlighted in blue.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, it's amazing the dead zone you can get just from being 10 feet from the other router. Hey, Bill.
So I messaged Jonathan last night, and he said he was interested in the guy I was telling you about.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I think that I think if you can still make it,
Yeah.
and let's have people in here, and that seems to really do well with everybody. They like to hear about, people's experience, and kind of, got to get people that, have some sobriety.
He's got a pretty cool story. He didn't start using it until he went on that CMT show, Can You Do It? And he got introduced to people in the music industry and that kind of thing in Nashville, and just become part of that culture for quite a few years. His dad's a preacher. Grew up same church I grew up in.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
About 2.5 minutes until the open. Maybe this is the show.
Sounds like him.
Yeah, that is David Jackson.
Access to healthcare, access to other business resources that may take the dependency of needing.
If that's what keeps happening for the remainder of time, that could be really easy.
Yeah.
Some of those type businesses that feel that's a necessity. If you have good broadband access,
You just record it.
it's just about anyone, and that is one of the.
That's what he did this time around.
Maybe if he doesn't have a guest, he'll record it.
And
Okay.
that really kind of points back to that.
But I'm not really sure how that show works.
Businesses in your community that can fly the flag
Probably about
of success.
a minute and a half.
And helping them grow to the point where not only they can be even more self-sustaining and profitable and successful.
All right, we've got
but they
Todd
can also
watching.
serve as a success story
Good morning,
for
Todd.
businesses that may be interested in coming here, and they see someone like ECR Software excelling in the tech space, or they see a retail organization like Mass General Store really thriving, with a regional company that is based in an area that, quite honestly, is not the easiest to get to sometimes. So, those things are important as we develop as a community, and those ideas and thoughts, philosophies we'll be talking about some. And we look forward to sharing more information about where this goes, how we continue to hope for the best for our current
Chris
business,
Townsend's
and also
watching.
try to bring in some new opportunities here to the area that will keep our economy thriving. So we're excited about that. Again, we'll keep you up.
All right, 30 seconds till the
And
open.
that does it for us this week here on Mind Your Business. Again, thanks to the folks here at High Country Radio for giving us this opportunity. Look forward to seeing many of you at Business After Hours later tonight. That's over again at the Walker College of Business. Remember, free parking in the Peacock lot after 5 o'clock. Event from 5 o'clock to 7, and look forward to seeing again a great crowd out there this evening. We will be right back here with you again next week, same time, same place. So make plans to join us once again on Mind Your Business, an exclusive presentation for the Boone Area Chamber of Commerce on AM 1450 WATA 96.5.
There's Felicia. We're at the high school with Felicia.
And I'm
Hey,
just
Felicia.
looking for help. I've had advice given to me, but it was confusing and didn't really work.
Recovery Talk helped me help a friend.
I like it. You can call in and talk about your problems.
15 seconds.
Solutions. That's what I was looking for. Recovery Talk helped.
Have a problem? Know someone who does? Call us. 828-262-1567.
5, 4, 3,
This is
2.
Recovery Talk on WATA.
Hey, good morning. This is Jim Quigley here, the host of Recovery Talk. Recovery Talk is hope and help for the hurting. We're being broadcast live here in the High Country at AM 1450 and FM 96.5 WATA. And I have my co-host Chris Townsend. Say hi, Chris.
Good morning, guys.
And we're glad that you're joining us. Like you heard, if you are interested in calling in, being part of the show, 828-262-1567. That's 828-262-1567. We'd love to hear and field any question you may have about recovery. If you don't even necessarily have to have a problem yourself, but the likelihood of people in the listening audience right now that knows somebody or like some advice or anything like that, we'd love to just talk it through with you. Recovery Talk is sponsored and brought to you by Freedom Auto Tech. Freedom Auto Tech is a new auto shop here in Boone. If you have any banging or clinking going on under the hood, you have a check engine light on, give Freedom Auto Tech a call, 828-355-4434. That's 828-355-4434. They would love to set an appointment, come and give you a quote, an estimate, and diagnose your problem and get you fixed up. And
we hope to be able to announce some exciting news for our Subaru owners that are listening next week.
Oh.
So stay tuned next week. We might have something for you guys.
Oh, exciting news about Subaru. Now, that's a car that's beloved here. If you go anywhere else in the country, well, I know there's probably other pockets in the country, but man, Subaru owners, we could have a whole show about Subaru owners, couldn't we?
I think so.
They're a unique breed. So what we've been doing last show was we were going over the 12 steps. That originated 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, and through that has been birthed all kinds of different 12-step fellowships, and we were just kind of going over them. We're gonna try to get through the rest of them today. We kind of get caught and long-winded about certain things, but Chris and I are going to try to get through the rest of them. But again, if we're just filling up some airtime right now, what we do have planned, though, for the next few shows, we're going to start having some more guests in here. It really seems to work well out there when we have a different perspective, someone that's having some success, someone that's found freedom from substances, and we really like having people like that on. Not that we don't like you, Chris, but
I like success stories anyway.
Oh.
Anytime there's a success story, I like hearing it.
So kind of just a quick recap. I think I said quick recap last time when we were talking about the first three steps, but this is really going to be a quick recap. But the first three steps are all about admitting that basically, if you're going to put them all together, like, I don't know how to do life. I obviously have this symptom, which is my substance abuse, that shows that I don't know how to do life. My life is unmanageable. And, basically the theory behind the rest of them, there's people that actually know how to do life.
Yeah.
There are people that have come from the state of unmanageable life, and now they're living differently. So they obviously know something that I don't know. And I'm going to go ahead and turn all of my faculties over. They say to God as you understand him, to a higher power. You're basically at a point of humility in your life to really, like, I don't know. Other people obviously know. So I'm going to be an open vessel to learn. And then that's kind of brings us up to step 4, which when you start to actually do some work. Step 4, I'll just read it, is made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. You ever get to this step before in your own experience, Chris?
Not when I was experiencing 12-step, but when I was in the program that we worked for, the second phase kind of forces you to do this.
Okay.
You really got to focus on some of your inner demons.
So I did this years ago, and I was getting those 5-star binders. That I was used that, and I was given instructions, and I'm not going to get into all those details, but basically, if you go and you get any kind of advice about this, basically this is a resentment list, right? So you get down and you try to think through your life, and you try to think and write down resentments you have, and a brief description of what they are, and how it made you feel and all that kind of stuff. And this is a step in my experience, and just in knowing other people that are going through steps. This is a really difficult time,
It is.
Because you got to do the searching and fearless part of it. And if you're working with somebody that's that has been through this, has been successful with this, that could even be challenging. You'd be challenged. Are you really searching and being fearless about this? Because fear has been something that's kept people in the situations they have. And you get down to the point to where you're actually wanting to talk about some of the ugliness that you have been trying to conceal for a long time.
Right.
I recently had a friend that was struggling pretty significantly, and basically I kind of called them out. Said, hey, look, I know that something's not right. I know that this is basically kind of backed them in a quarter to where they admitted that, I've been relapsed for a while.
Yeah.
And I was like, and I've known this person for a while, and they started to admit to me what was going on. And this is the way they started. They basically, if you could think about it, they started to admit from like the earliest and going back from there. It's like, hey, look, last week was a bad week, man, and this is what happened. And, a couple weeks before that,
so they started with the most recent occurrence.
Yeah. And like the idea was, because I know this person well enough, I knew what they were doing. They were basically wanting to go back far enough to where they feel that in their own mind they've satisfied my curiosity about what was really going on. But the problem with that is it's not about me. It was about them. And this is the advice I gave them. I said, look, just stop what you're doing. I said, look, this is what I want to tell you. I need you to hear me. You are going to continue to have the problems and repeat this cycle until you can sit down with somebody and tell them how ugly it really is. Okay? And that's kind of what, this 4 and bleeding into 5 is, in my opinion. It's, you got to sit down and write down on paper how ugly it really is. How deep do your resentments go? How deep? And, I think that, obviously, you don't have to hit it out of the park the first time. People obviously go through these steps, and once you get to the end, you kind of continue to repeat it, and you'll go deeper and deeper. But that is an important part. Is how am I responding to life? And here's all these negative responses I had to life. And I'm not saying that there isn't any justifiable reason why you should have resentments, but what are you responsible? What am I responsible for when it comes to life? We're responsible with how we respond to it. Does it make sense? And
admitting that you don't have the tools to cope with what's ailing you, or I guess is a good word.
Right.
I didn't have the tools in my toolbox, as we say, to help myself. So I turned to substances to feel better.
So back when this stuff was, I think when the original program was going out and whatnot, it actually says in the book that this step 5 is usually done with like a priest of some sort. Step 5 is kind of like a confession. You get your resentment list, and hopefully with a person helping guide you, and they call that a sponsor in your group, in the 12-step scenario. Hopefully that as you've gone through your list, they've actually helped you see your role in all your resentments. Does that make sense? Like,
yes. This
is where your part is, okay? And then, through that, you start to understand that, like, look, I have responsibility here, It's not just that the whole world is against me, or all these people are against me, or all this bad's been done to me. I actually have responsibility in how I've responded, right? So once you've gone through that, this is another level of humility. It's like, hey, I'm ready now to admit or like kind of confess to somebody. This is the actual wording of step 5. It says, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. So really understanding what is the exact nature of my wrongs, like where do I have wrong or responsibility in this stuff, and it's just getting it out there, confessing, like, yes, I really did these things. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Confession, again, can't come from any kind of source except for a person that's humble. So I remember one of my first experiences going through this. It blew me away that I realized obviously how self-centered and selfish I was, but how manipulative that I was being in my own anger and resentment. Does that make sense? And just being able to finally sit down and admit that to somebody, it's kind of a freeing thing.
Almost, sometimes I feel like I took pride in being able to flip my problems on somebody else. You know, have you ever... manipulation, what you said. Again, getting past that and starting to admit some stuff was a huge step.
Isn't that the common descriptor of people that struggle with addiction? The thing I commonly hear is master manipulators.
Yeah.
Master manipulators. People that know how to, like you said, they could be called out on something and try to flip it on the other person in a matter of seconds. And if you don't know how to joust with somebody like that, you could get buried really quick. And it's a skill that's necessary to learn in order to continue on with the behavior that you are living. It's a commonly known thing that people that struggle with substance abuse are actually very intelligent people, because they've had to learn to manipulate life in such a way to get this thing going, keep this thing going and whatnot, that if you were to put that energy into any kind of a business or something like that, I mean, you would be pretty successful. Does that make any sense? So 4 and 5, again, this is where you're starting to get down in the root. Another person I recently talked to or listened to, that Jordan Peterson thing that we listened to. This is kind of like psychoanalysis, if you want to put any kind of like a scientific or medical phrase on it. You're really starting to analyze, how I think, and respond and whatnot, and this is a good thing. We're getting close to break, but the 6th step, we were entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. There is a sense that a lot of times people try to rush through these things. I would admit that the first time I had experience with this and worked with 12-step, I was like, oh yeah, I did that. Yeah, entirely ready. But if you really have someone working with you that's good, they can point out throughout your daily life, if you're being accountable, that it doesn't seem like you're ready here. You know what I'm saying? But we're going to get back into this. 828-262-1567 is the number to call if you want to be a part of the show. We're talking about 12 steps. We're going to pick up with 6.
Yeah, we'd love to hear guys call in. We want to hear your stories, not just ours.
We'll hear it when we come back.
Have you ever been stuck in a tight spot? Don't worry.
There's Margaret watching. Travis,
Drew.
Record Service has a brand new 60-ton rotator rector that will handle
about a
anything
3.5
that needs to be
minute break.
towed,
Okay, great.
or lifted. Have you ever been bent out of shape? Don't worry about that either. Hampton's Body Shop and Record Service has the new 21-foot Chief Goliath computerized frame machine that will pull and align your car's frame back into factory specifications. So whether your car, truck, or SUV is stuck in a tight spot or been out of shape, contact Hampton's Body Shop and Record Service by visiting them on Boondock Street in Boone or calling 828-264-3924. That's 264-3924. Hampton's Body Shop and Record Service. Best of the best for 7 years in a row, thanks to the confidence of our friends and neighbors.
Did you know there's a fantastic thrift store on the Waterfly Bypass in Boone? It's operated by Freedom Farm Ministries, and all proceeds go directly back into the ministry to help fund men's housing, food, and quality of life while they recover from horrible addiction and find freedom in Jesus Christ. It's recently renovated with a great new look and merchandise. Vendors are welcome during business hours, and they'll pick up anything of good quality from your home or business. Store hours are Monday through Saturday, 9:30 to 5, Call 386-6200 or learn more at freedomfarmministries.org.
2 minutes.
This summer, Clean Cut
So I wonder how
would like to give tips to make your
can
home
people
the
hear.
perfect place to enjoy
I don't remember
this
these
warmer
speakers
weather.
on before.
Building a retaining wall
Were they on
is a
before?
great way to add usable outdoor
These
space. To gain a flat
these
area
turn
for
off
outdoor
whenever the
entertaining.
mic's on.
A retaining wall is a great way
Okay.
Go watch. I'm
with
gonna
the extra
pause
space
this
to
down.
build a patio, a fireplace,
No.
or other
Okay.
family and guests. For the
So you
past
can
10 years,
control-
Clean
yeah.
Cut Landscaping and Lawn has been serving the high country.
I was going to ask if you knew what all those buttons did.
Thankfully they're labeled, and even then I don't know what they do. I don't even know if these are used for CD players, a cassette player, which we may or may not have. Your microphones, no idea here. No idea what that is. That would run the computer if I wanted to play like a YouTube video or something. That's the phone. I think this is if we broadcast live, but I'm not sure. I work mostly in that room. Even then, I only know what 3 of the buttons
Gassed up
do.
and ready to be Mr. Perfect Lawn. Your wife and neighbors
what
must
time
be so proud.
do you DJ or what? Do you have a show?
Yeah, so 3 to 6 p.m. I do the afternoon
After
show.
putting in
on
5
Classic Hits.
grueling days of work, don't you deserve a relaxing,
It's fun.
mold-free day off?
Play all the music I
Of course you
grew up
do.
with.
After all, you are in North Carolina.
Just like
Come
riding
on,
in the
man,
car with my
we
dad
clear your
again.
weekend and trade the yard work and other mundane errands for some fun at the park.
What is that?
14 national and 41 state
100.7.
parks across
100.7.
North
Yeah, I listen to you
Carolina.
guys.
It's
I
nearly
appreciate that.
impossible to say
Yeah.
no to the great outdoors.
We got about
Not to
20
mention that
seconds, but-
hiking, biking,
No, it's really
fishing, and
nice. You
camping
know,
are
if I had the
all
option
proven
to
to be
choose in
better ways to
between
spend
like
your
the
time
top 40
than washing,
station or this
cleaning,
one,
and mowing. So
easily,
just procrastinate
easily
already
Classic
and
Hits.
go.
Top
You'll be
40 is
glad
not
you
very
did.
my
For more
favorite.
information,
Not
go to
either.
visit
Alright, 10 seconds, yeah.
nc.com/parks. Sponsored by the North Carolina Association of
Here we go.
Broadcasters and
5,
Visit North Carolina,
4,
a part of the Economic
3,
Development Partnership of
2.
North Carolina in cooperation with this station.
We're back with Recovery Talk, Hope and Help for the Hurting. Recovery Talk's brought to you by Freedom Auto Tech. Freedom Auto Tech's the shop here in town. And, you know, I don't ever really give this description of it, but Freedom Auto Tech is attached to the ministry of Freedom Farm Ministries in a way that it's a separate for-profit business, but the profits from it go to fund guys that are in Freedom Farm and the program itself. So, you know, it's a way to where people can come and get a service they always need. You know, everybody needs, you know, work on their cars
everybody needs
all the time,
maintenance.
and you can get you know, your car fixed right at a good price, and know that these people aren't making millions of dollars off of you, millions of dollars. Inside Freedom Farm joke with Freedom Farm Matt.
Yeah.
So millions of dollars are, but the profits are going to help fund Freedom Farm Ministries, just like our thrift store that's over at the 105 bypass. So Freedom Auto Tech, 828-355-4434. That's 828-355-4434. Give them a call if you got an issue with your car, and they will get you fixed up. And if you want to call into this show, 828-262-1567. It's 828-262-1567. Or if you're watching on Facebook Live, we got a question from Terry I'm gonna get to here in just a second. And our show producer over here, Mike, he's really working on trying to help get it to where we thought we had it figured out, everybody, folks, to where you guys would be able to hear call-ins on Facebook Live. We had another kink in the road, but we're working on it, and we hope to be able to get it working eventually. So I'm not going to say next show because I don't want to. We don't know. So we're trying our hardest. Hey, Melissa. Good morning. So before we get back into the steps, it says so from last week. Do the guys who complete their 1-year commitment to the program, do they answer the question of what has changed in their life to acknowledge the root cause of their addiction? I always personally ask that question when guys not only finish their 1 year, but when they are leaving prematurely. And what I mean by the prematurely, we ask them for a 1-year commitment at our program. And I get guys, I call it the overconfidence of a few months. They doing the best they've ever done. If you're gonna imagine their family are thrilled, they have a job and they're actually going to work and they're now paying for their life as far as they're becoming self-sufficient. And next thing you know, it's like, hey, I got this now. And that's usually a pretty dangerous time in my mind, the overconfidence, because what will happen is they make a big decision, like, hey, I'm going to move, I'm ready to go, I'm going to get an apartment, and I say, hey, I kind of just walk them through in the conversation, say, hey, did you call here because you had a lot of problems before, coming here? Yes. And did we help you? Did we give you good advice? Did we make some good suggestions in your life? Yes. So why would you now, at this point, think you don't need to invite us into your conversation about, what's going through your mind and whatnot, and you're just making these very large decisions, And they will usually give me some, at that point they kind of realize that, this isn't very good, and I really don't have an answer for this, right? And they say, well, look, I'm just ready to go. They'll get to that point where they don't want to admit that, hey, you know what, maybe this is a bad idea. That's that overconfidence and the kind of pride, and that's I asked them that exact question that Terry's saying. So do me a favor, since we have this relationship and you're leaving, and can you just at least tell me what has changed? What's the big thing? What have you learned about yourself? What's the root? And that usually turns into not a very good conversation, because basically they are avoiding, going any deeper in their life as far as, what's going on with them, the root causes and whatnot, because they've kind of just gotten back into this mode. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah. I mean, maybe I can speak into it too, because I experienced it myself. For me, the root cause doesn't really go away. You still have issues.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we still have problems. It's just a matter of, we know now. For me, the way it works is, I know that I have to surrender my issue, and I know what fixes it, and that's my relationship with Jesus Christ. So that's my answer. That's what's changed in my life, is knowing that I need to surrender everything. I need to be transparent in what I do, even relationships, and seek counsel. I know that's in Scripture. You can probably tell us what Scripture is seeking counsel of other people in any decision in your life, and I think that continues after your year, not just while you're in the program.
Yeah, I mean, a life of discipleship is absolutely promoted throughout Scripture. And, just to kind of flop into the secular, point of view, I mean, if you've actually gone through these steps, and we're at step 6 where it says we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character, and then humbly ask Him to remove our shortcomings, you're admitting to some, if you've done, the work, you're admitting to some pretty deep character flaws that should say, hey, look, you know what? I need somebody speaking into my life. I need someone checking my decision making, because one of the common phrases in the recovery world, your best thinking got you here.
That's
you
right.
know?
Yeah.
And there's so much truth to that. There's all these little phrases. When you stay around recovery long enough, you learn all these little phrases. But man, is that true? Your best thinking got you here. So, I'm not above it. I would say probably one of the scariest places for someone that struggles with substance abuse to get to is a place where they think they don't need anybody talking to them anymore, because they got this now. And that comes from, again, a loss of humility and an overconfidence of self and self-sufficiency and whatnot. That usually is what brings people back going in the wrong direction. Terry, I constantly challenge guys when they come here and they get to that point where things are going well. I say, look, man, don't fall into that. Like, life is just, I'm not doing drugs and drinking anymore, and I'm working and living life. I mean, your life's got to be a lot more dramatically different than I've just removed drugs out of it and alcohol, and I'm doing what a responsible human being is supposed to do as far as going to work and coming home, cleaning my things. Those are all very important things, but I mean, those are all very important things, but they can't be just that this is just some normal routine that I'm not addressing. What is it that gets me ticking? What is it that gets me viewing life in this way, that I become a resentful person and I respond in the way that I do to it? I want to say a couple highs to my mom and my Uncle Willie, who's staying with my mom right now. We were speaking off air about classic hits. When I was 12 to 14 years old, my father had gotten an open fisherman 24-foot boat, and my addiction between 12 and 14 was deep sea fishing. And my Uncle Willie and I, every Saturday and Sunday, we were out there catching fish, and I spent every dime I had on tackle, and that's where I was introduced to classic rock, because when my dad was on the boat, it was always oldies, which I appreciate oldies, but my dad really had a hard time with seasickness, so my uncle would take me out a lot of times, and he'd just go right to the classic hits, and man, that just opened up my whole world. I had a pet ferret one time when I was 14. His name was Floyd, after Pink Floyd. My mom loved that. So my brother's watching too. Hey, Kenny, and Valerie is watching. How you doing, Valerie? But yeah, complacency is very dangerous. You're welcome, Terry. Thank you for the question. And complacency could be one of these defects of character, but basically going back to the steps, steps 6 and 7, these are just still some more acknowledgement of your, if you want to use the scientific term, the psychoanalysis, or your friend has helped you see yourself. And that was something I wanted to say. There's a phrase where it says, you can't see your own face clearly. Sometimes you need a mirror, right, to help see your defects. And that's the idea of working with somebody that's been through a process like that, because sometimes I can't see my faults, you can't see them. And you need someone that you trust, has been there, to be able, that's the benefit of having, like, the sponsor walking you through, is somebody that's done this before.
And it comes back again to humility, is being able to willing to accept that criticism.
Absolutely, and which some are going to be very tough. So we're back at we've got a break in about 20 seconds here. 828-262-1567 is the number to call if you want to call into the show. 828-262-1567. I'll do my best, if you do call in, to try to let the Facebook audience know what's being said through my earphone. But we'll be back here in just a minute.
It's the High Country's information station.
No, you're good. I like the 5-second countdown too, because I kind of almost don't know. Like, I'm floating it out there. Like, where are we?
Yeah, I got ripped for that once in Raleigh. Around like 11 o'clock or something like that. That's when the lottery always throws up, And so there's 10 seconds where they'll do like a tease, and the lottery hits at that time, no matter what. And I didn't realize that countdown was important. And then the anchor's just grilling into me, and I'm just this green kid. I'm like, I'm sorry.
I feel like you just ruined the whole radio station. One mistake.
Yeah, can't mess up them lottery numbers, man. People
know.
Yeah, people spend that money already.
There's been a time where the wrong lottery played, like the day previous, and someone had the winning numbers. Oh yes. I don't know if we got...
Can you imagine being that guy, dude?
Oh, that'd be heartbreaking. I can't imagine that pain.
I can't handle playing. I've played it a handful of times in my life, when it's gotten really big. Not, I've always, not understood that. Like, I'm going to play now. It's like, it's really big. It's like, what?
When everyone else
the starting point isn't really big, I mean, you wouldn't be... That's not big enough for you to play,
Yeah, it starts at like 20 million.
Yeah.
That's not enough money for me.
Yeah, I'll play now that it's 60,
I was like, if it's 20 million, I could retire right now if I do it.
Yeah. But it's dangerous for me because, man, I'm one of those people. I'll start fantasizing about it. I was like, man, if I get this money,
you'll wait till
all the good I'm gonna do.
You stay up till the drawing happens and topping your numbers in.
I actually don't think I've been that bad. I think I've checked them on the phone the next day, and it's always the same. I've never win. Now, we're talking about my brother. He'd probably hit it every time. He's my brother's got this luck streak. I don't know what it is with him.
I think the Masters drawing was yesterday. Did you get an email?
We all did. Nope. No. Now. I was like, now.
In June, North Carolinians began receiving
we all
Medicare cards,
we all
and
applied
scammers
for.
posing as
They have
Medicare
the Masters lottery tickets.
Yeah, I tried that too.
My brother won last year.
Other fraudsters
Brother
are
won
trying
last
to get
year.
bank account
See, now
information
that
by saying a
my brother,
refund
my
is
dad,
owed.
and I all live in like
Medicare
separate
never charges
houses,
a
it's like, all right,
processing
we have 3
fee.
times the chance of getting
Never
some
always for a
tickets, and
bank
even then,
account
it's not
number.
helping.
No refunds are owed.
My brother
Protect
also
yourself
put
with
20 down on
AARP
the winner.
Learn more about this
And it was
free service
66 to 1.
states.aarp.org/stop-fraud.
Wow. He's got the long shot 2 years in a row. He picked, was it Sergio?
Yeah.
He picked Sergio. He was 44 to 1, I think. And then he picked, who was the winner this year?
Brain fart. Kenny, top and tell us who won the Masters this year.
Yeah, I forgot his name, but he picked him too. 66. He always,
helps you make a big difference.
My mom's like, what?
I found out in high school. I wouldn't say it was a gambling issue, but just because thankfully we weren't playing for much money, but we were playing Texas Hold'em after track one day, and I'm sitting there in the final one, Reed, I gotta get all the money.
Patrick Reed.
And then I ended up losing, and then I just found myself playing Texas Hold'em on my phone all throughout school, like the next month. And it wasn't until like my phone died, like just broke and I couldn't use it anymore, that I was just jonesing for some gambling. I'm like, okay, we're gonna stop now before we start actually losing real money.
I'm not telling family secrets. These aren't like hard secrets.
And only 8 people can see right now. So.
Yeah.
Food Express says it'll fly short tests of a lunar lander from there. Eventually, it hopes to fly for NASA and other customers. Peter King, CBS News, Orlando.
A school security guard from South Carolina has been arrested and charged with sexually assaulting a 13-year-old girl at a North Carolina school a number of times this year. 26-year-old Muriel McLuhan of Rock Hill, South Carolina,
teachers and kids and all the sex stuff that goes on is unbelievable, man.
Expected high tides in coastal areas across the country increase the likelihood of coastal flooding, potentially deadly ocean currents, and sea erosion. NOAA says higher than normal tides are increasingly impacting coastal flooding because of the continued sea
It's usually more women teachers.
Yeah. I wonder if that's the case or if that's what gets more media, though. You know what I mean?
Maybe, yeah. That's true.
I don't know, because when you think about it, they're both
Chili sauce, coleslaw,
yeah.
And it's like, right, but on the
side of rosemary fries, TripAdvisor
it's very backwards how people view it, though, because it's when it's a female teacher, there's a certain stigma to it. When it's a male teacher or something, it's the same thing but viewed incredibly differently.
Yeah.
And it's mind-boggling. Really.
Mike Rayleigh,
It just seems like it gets more traction when it's a female.
Severe Weather Center 9, High Country Weather.
It's true. It lives on forever on Facebook. Terry. Hey, Aunt Nancy.
Widespread expected, just a hit or miss downpour here and there with highs in the mid-upper 70s. A little
I'll never call you Aunt Nancy. Aunt Sibby.
60s tonight. Mid-upper 70s for Friday and the first part of the weekend.
15 seconds.
15 seconds.
But nothing widespread. By Sunday, we're a little hotter. We're back to 80. From Severe Weather Center 9, meteorologist Keith Monday for High Country Radio. This
Here we go.
is
4,
WATA
3,
AM
2.
1450 and 96.5 FM.
Welcome back to Recovery Talk, Hope and Help for the Hurting. We're glad you're with us today, and we'd love to hear from you. 828-262-1567. It's 828-262-1567 if you want to call in and be part of the show. Freedom Auto Tech is the official sponsor of the show, and we always want to give a plug for them when we come back from break. But Freedom Auto Tech is a local auto shop, and they're ready to get your car in there if it needs some work on it. And you can contact them at 828-355-4434. That's 828-355-4434. And understand when you're getting your car fixed, all the profits for the company are going to help the program of Freedom Farm Ministries. So give them a call. So we've gotten through 6 and 7, and I apologize if anybody's listening to me and is like, man, this guy doesn't really know what he's talking about. I'm doing my best going through these things. And, I think I told you from the very start that, I don't personally go through, I've gone through like kind of an evolution in my thoughts about 12-step recovery, where at one time in my life I was very pro, and then I became kind of negative, and now I'm kind of going back to center, if that makes any sense. So I just wanted to go over these steps, and I do have experience with them. So yeah, we're at we just got to steps 6 and 7, and this is where you're basically admitting through the analysis of your resentments and working through those with somebody, and through humility and, like you said, constructive criticism. If you're able to get through all that, which, man, that's got to be tough. It's got to be really tough because again, it's ugly, and part of that shame and that ugliness about myself is something I don't want people seeing, and it's been a big root of why I've done the things that I've done. Because you know what, when I'm using substances, I don't have to think about it. I don't have to think about the ugliness of life. I don't have to think about failure and bad decisions, and I don't have to think about all those things. But the problem is that you don't have to think about them then, but when you sober up, you do, and then you have to hurry up and use again in order to not think about it anymore. Yeah. So here you've gotten through the ugliness, and you've admitted it, and you've gone through like an analysis of it. And step 8, you now are willing to make a list. This is the verbiage of step 8. Made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. Another thing that sometimes you need to take some time with. I can maybe get to the point of admitting, right? Okay, I've done these things, but am I willing to go and make amends to these things?
That's the hard part, isn't it?
Yeah. So this is another very, very challenging things in the life of people that have made mistakes, and this is the compounding problem of addiction. It's like the longer you go with it, the more the mistakes mount up. And then when you almost, if you can think about it, like somebody that's using a lot and putting I had a friend, my good buddy Joe, he used to say, got to put my head out, Quig, got to put my head out. And that has stuck with me my whole life, because that's what he did, got to put my head out. Because when I'm sober, my head is one of my worst enemies, because what's going through your head is all this stuff, that I've done and whatnot. So here you are now. You're not using this Band-Aid that's just bursting around the seam. It's not sticking anymore. It's not working anymore. It's causing all kinds of problems. So now you gotta go and face the ugliness and go and make amends for the ugliness. And man, it's tough. It's tough. When it comes to the idea of amends. Any of them that really haunted you or in your life or anything like that?
Yeah, the ones that really got to me the worst was people that I owed money to. I mean, those really, really got to me. Whether I borrowed and didn't pay back, or whether I stole from somebody. You got to go back. And you know what? A lot of times when you go back to those people, when they realize that you're doing better and they truly care about you, 90% of the time they forgive. They forgive the debt, which was awesome in my life. I mean, it helped me a lot. So.
Actually going, that's actually the 9th step, actually going and doing this work after you become willing. Step 9 is worded, you made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. So, this is something, again, you really need someone, because you get some people that get so passionate about cleaning up their, what they call, is another recovery term, cleaning up their side of the streets. They want to clean up so much that they get a little over ambitious, and they really need to think about some of these amends, because you actually could start bringing more harm to people that maybe aren't ready to hear from you or talk to you or anything like that. Does that make sense? And
especially in a relationship.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Speaking of the money amend, I had almost a similar situation. I owed somebody that had known me since I was a child. I'm just going to tell you that basically he was the pastor of my church growing up, and he had seen me get sober, and he had seen me go off to Bible college, and he actually was there when I graduated, and he was actually here when I was ordained as a minister. But if you remember my journey through recovery, is I had 6 years of sobriety, relapsed for 5 years, and then now I'm 7+ years of sobriety. During that 5-year relapse, I had an encounter with him where he wasn't living in the area I was living with, but I was able to con him out of $1,500.
Oh, man.
I did. And when I got sober, he never held it against me, never asked me for the money or anything like that. But man, it ate at me.
Yeah.
And and I brought it up to him a couple times, saying, "Hey, look, I'm working, I'm working on," and I just didn't have any kind of resources. But anyway, a few years ago, I was able to finally get to a position to pay him back.
That's awesome.
And I called him, and I was just like, I had already worked it all out in my mind. Like, I had already added the interest in, and I was like, this is the appropriate thing, and I was just like so ready to finally get this off of my mind, So I called him up, and I started to lay out my plan of restitution, and I even had I was even apologizing for not being more explicit and letting him know throughout the years I was remembering this. And he literally said, "Hey, can I call you right back?" And it was like weird because he never does that, right? He's like in the middle of this huge rolling out of my plan of restitution. He said, "Can I call you back?" And I was like, "Sure." And I didn't know how to take it. And he calls me back in like 3 minutes. He goes, "Look, I need to talk to my wife. She's sitting right here. I'm actually home for lunch. You guys got me at a good time." He said, "So first, we don't even remember doing this, He said, "I don't even remember giving you the money." He said, "And I'm so glad that you want to make." And he gave me, he said, "Look," he gave me a ministry. He said, "I want you to make a donation to this ministry with half of it." And he says that I want you to donate the other half to your ministries you're working for now.
That's so cool.
Yeah. It was just like you said, like when you're finally ready to come in, a lot of times it just doesn't turn out the way it was going to turn out. So
we make problems in our head so much bigger than what they are, don't we?
And going out and this again, when I've said that, if I wish you could teach people humility, this is actually something that's coming to my mind as we're going through these steps. I didn't realize how much your humility is challenged through each one of these steps. Mm-hmm. I mean, being able to be willing and then going and making those amends. My first time through sobriety, I'll tell you one more men's story. We're coming up on a break, but this just hit me back in my mind. This was like one of the strangest amends thing, but I was one of those real passionate guys when I first went through the steps. And there was this kid that when I was in the 8th grade, that guys in our classroom had like riled us up to fight each other after school, right? And I got suspended for 3 days for fighting this guy, and I never had a problem with him, right? But like throughout the rest of high school, me and this guy never talked, and there was always that like tension, right? Yeah. So one of the first time I got sober, I was out at a restaurant, and that turned into kind of a nightclub. Probably shouldn't have been there, but I wasn't drinking or anything like that. And there he is, sitting next to me, and I'm just sitting there, and I'm just like pumping. My heart's pumping because I'm like, I need to go and tell that guy I was sorry for that. Yeah. And I walked up to him, and I was like, "Hey, man, do you remember back in 8th grade?" And he was like, "Yeah, of course I do." And I was like, "That was so stupid, man. And I've never talked to you since then, and I've always felt terrible about that." He goes, "Man, so have I." He goes, I've always felt so terrible." And it was funny. And I said, "Look, it's real important for me to like clean the slate with you, man, because I just hate feeling every time I see you in town, or, I mean, we live in the same community. I just hate that, man." And he's like, "Dude, I'm so glad." He goes, "Are you doing one of them 12-step things?" And I was like, yeah, actually I am. And he goes, "Man, that's really cool." And it was just like, it didn't turn out anyway that I thought it was going to. I mean, we didn't become like best friends after or anything, but that's when I realized that, like, man, I really just don't understand a lot of times how other people are viewing situations that I am. And that's the thing about I think that you learn through going through a process like this. You start to realize that, like, the way I'm assuming everything is usually just not even close to being the way it actually is.
I experienced the same thing.
Yeah. And these are life lessons that, even people that don't struggle with substances, if you start talking to them about your experiences of going through like this, you'll realize that other people have experiences. That this is kind of just life, right? Yeah. I mean, this is kind of just a normal life, human beings, human nature. There really isn't any kind of crazy psychotherapy stuff going on here. This is just really humans being humans and doing what you're supposed to do, the right things. That makes sense?
It does.
There's my wonderful sister Melissa's watching. Aren't you supposed to be working? She's in control of people's power down in Florida. Now I'm worried about people's power. Anyway, how you doing, Melissa? So we're getting up close to a break. We are going to make it. We've only got three steps left. Well, 2 more steps really. No, 3 more steps to go over. we're going to get through them. We got about 15 minutes left. We'll see you when we come back from break.
Living in a small community like we do, it's nice to have a hometown pharmacy that takes care of its
And this is
customers.
the final stretch,
At
right?
all of our drug locations in town, that's exactly what you will find.
We're going to
We offer the heartfelt service that you deserve. On top of the excellent service we pride ourselves on, we offer over 300 prescriptions for only $3.99. So please stop by and visit us at any of our locations in town, whether it's at King Street, New Market, Greenway, or
She's working from home and her
We are
power
ready
just
to
went
help
out.
you in any way.
She works for Florida Power and Light. So
Only when they call to sell you
Think she knows who to call?
I think so.
People trust Chris and Andrea.
Could be a
at
prank,
Statewide
though.
Insurance
Yeah,
Solutions
that's
in
true.
Jefferson. Family owned and operated for 30 years. Statewide Insurance
I was listening to Ben Shapiro the other day, and he was talking about how the American culture, he thinks in the next like 20 years that people won't even go to work anymore. People just all work from their homes or something like that. It's just getting more and more. I mean, not obviously not all jobs are like that, but a lot of jobs are going to start just heading that way. So your regular offices and stuff like that will start to.
I think there was a town in Vermont. I read an article about this, but
Yeah.
they were paying people to move to that town.
$10,000, I think.
Yeah, so work from home.
Yep.
Just live in the community, but work from home.
Yep.
And I was like, I wish I was in that career field. 10 grand just like that?
I think it was 10. It might have been more, actually.
I know they paid you, and then they paid for your move.
Yep.
So you get a good amount for it.
Just to populate the area. Just come here and work.
All right, we got
At
about
one time, Kansas was giving away land to move there. Like, move here, we'll give you a piece of land.
all right, 30 seconds. Actually, 20 now.
What if you had to sign a contract and have to stay for a certain period of time, or you just get free land and move back home?
Or move there, but still stay at the old.
Yeah.
Word. All right, here we go. 5, 4,
Mannequins in there or
3,
something.
2.
You'll be glad you did.
Welcome back to Recovery Talk, Hope and Help for the Hurting. 828-262-1567. That's 828-262-1567 if you want to call in and be a part of the show. Freedom Auto Tech is our official sponsor, 828-355-4434. It's 828-355-4434. Freedom Auto Tech is a premier auto repair shop here in Boone.
I like Premier.
Like that, Premier.
Yeah, sounds good.
And they will diagnose your problem and give you a fair estimate and guarantee their work for 2 years or 24,000 miles. That's the guarantee you get if you buy a part from Freedom Auto Tech. And all proceeds, all profits go to support the ministry of Freedom Farm Ministries. So go and get your car fixed. If it's broken, give them a call. So step 9, if you're going through step 9, if you, I guess it depends upon how long you've lived, is probably how long your list is, you know.
Yeah.
If you catch this early in life, I would say that maybe your list is a little bit shorter, but, people that have maybe, lived a very long and destructive life, maybe have longer step 9s, which is you take your step 8 list, the people that you have harmed, and you need to make amends to, and you're willing to, and then step 9 is actually going by that list and doing what you need to do. And again, all guided with some kind of a mentor sponsor. They call them sponsors in 12-step groups. So you do that. That could take some time. And then you get the maintenance steps here. This is the last 3 steps. It says 10, continued to take personal inventory, and when we're wrong, promptly admitted it. So you don't the personal inventory continues to go on. I mean, you're never 100%, are you?
No, I apologized to a coworker yesterday.
Did you?
Yeah.
I'm still waiting for you to apologize to me.
I'm sorry. I'm not sure.
I've got a resentment. But anyway, no, I'm not. That was just a joke. But yeah, you continue to do this, and again, that prompt admitting, that's when you start to build new habits, man. When you start to say, hey, you know what, I'm wrong here, and I just need to go and take care of this, and you go and you do it, and that will continue to keep you humble, and continue on this right path of humility and trying to do the right thing when it comes to dealing with flawed human beings that we all are. Okay. Step 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for the knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. This is something that I think is, at a base level, a good thing about 12-step recovery. They acknowledge that the problem is spiritual in nature, and that the answer to it is spiritual in nature. I'll get into some of the what I don't like about 12-step here after we get through them, but this is a constant, this is a step of encouraging you to constantly be seeking God as you understand Him for the ability to live this life that you've learned to live through these steps.
So was it originally God and then it transitioned to what they use now, higher power? Was the original book, did it say God and now they say higher power?
No. The program that this was birthed out of, this is just factual history. It was called the Oxford Group, which was specifically a Christian group. So they had a very specific understanding of God and a specific understanding of how you had a relationship with Him. And the 12 steps didn't exist in its form now. That's something that's changed. But Bill Wilson, one of the founding people of AA, he didn't necessarily like the Christian God. Does that make sense? And he had his own experience with God, and he said, well, look, as long as I'm acknowledging there is a God, we're good here. And I'll get a little bit more into that if we have time about some of that negative. But step 12 is having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we try to carry this message to alcoholics and practice these principles in all our affairs. So the what's in there is this need for continuing to bring this message to other people. Obviously, if you've struggled with alcohol or whatever 12-step group you're involved in, whatever substance is specific to that group, drugs, alcohol, whatever, you went to other people that struggled with that same thing, and you continue to bring this message of freedom to them, and this becomes getting you out of yourself, and this starts to fill that purpose void in your life. Is my life just going to be that now I'm free, I just go to work and live my life? If you try to live like that, I guarantee you will slip back into your old ways. But this is that getting you out of yourself, bringing a message, caring about other people, and this gets you others focused instead of me focused. Does that make sense?
Yeah. We joke a lot of times and say, okay, you're healed when we go through our program. And a lot of times when you try to fix something, you've got a list of steps, and you follow those steps, and then you're done, and you don't have to fix it anymore. But these steps are something that you have to work on a daily basis. This isn't a one and done type thing.
Absolutely. So, me being a Christian, if I look at these steps and I have an understanding of a God, what's unique about me being a Christian and my understanding of God is that I understand why I have a relationship with God. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. There is a Savior that has bridged the gap between a holy God and an unholy person, right? And the whole concept in Christian theology is that if God is holy, by definition, a holy God cannot have relationship with unholy. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So there's a problem, right? That's the problem. How does an unholy thing have relationship with something holy? So if I don't have a Savior to bridge that gap that makes me right with God, right? And all I have is a process of living life. Basically, this is my opinion. The process becomes what bridges the gap between me and a holy God. Does that make sense?
It does.
So this is where I think that in my opinion, obviously, the 12 steps fall short. Because you're acknowledging God, you're acknowledging this spiritual thing out there, whatever it is you understand it to be, but you're also assuming that you can have relationship with this thing because you're bringing this positive thing to the table, or you're just assuming that he basically looks down and has a relationship with anybody in spite of your unholiness. Does that make sense?
So there should be a 13th step.
Well, I have a good friend that I think we're going to get on here as a guest, Danny, that has been through all of it. He's real interesting.
Danny's a cool guy.
Yeah, he's a cool guy. He's older. He's lived a life. he's been through it all, the ringers, and he'll tell you, you know what, they tried to give me 12 steps, 24 steps. It only took 1 step for me finally. And, you know, there's truth in that. But again, you know, this is, if you understand how I have a relationship with God, is that, you know what, this was the Oxford group. This was the original group. It's like, hey, you know what? Jesus has made me right with God. With all my crap, he has made me right with God. He's given me forgiveness, and he's paid penalty that I'm deserved of for my unholiness, right? So because that has happened, I have this motivation to go and live a life that's very principled. I'm trying to grow and get better, which these steps help me do, right? And ultimately, I want to pass this message on to other people, right? So that's where I think where it works in my mind, in my own you know, worldview and everything. That's where I have the motivation to do these things, not because these things make me right with God, but because I've been made right with God. I do these things. Right. I want to do it in appreciation for what He's done, right? Whereas I think that's where, you know, I don't know if anybody's thinking about it as deeply as I do. I have been accused of thinking of things too deeply, but you know, on the other hand, if it's just that, like, I'm doing these things, and what is my gauge of my progress in doing them? Obviously, it's the other people that are doing the same thing as I'm. Who's doing it good? Who's doing it bad? And obviously, we get into this kind of like, you know, rating each other. Like, I'm doing it better than Chris, right? And Chris is doing it better than. So, you know, who is it doing good enough to? Where is the cutoff? Like, what is the standard that needs to be met in order to do it, in order to be accepted by God? And that's where I think that you get lost. You know, you can get lost real quick when the world around you is your gauge, your standard.
There's no answer without the Savior, like you said.
Right. And I've had friends, man, that that said, you know, if you go do 12 steps, and I'm going to say this before we end because we're about ready to end the show. But if you have someone that comes and does these things, I would highly recommend, if this is where you want to start with your recovery, go find a 12-step group, go find a community, and listen to them and do everything they tell you. Get a sponsor, do everything they tell you to do. You will stay sober, okay? And then after some time, if you feel like something's missing, find out what that thing is that's missing. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
I have a good friend of mine that's running a program in Minnesota, and that's where his heart is. You know, after 4 or 5 years, man, people doing these things, he goes, if they do what they're told to do, they'll stay sober. Because I want to talk to those people who have been doing it for a few years, because sometimes they get to the point where they realize something is missing. All right, well, we're getting, that's it for today's show. We're going to start having people on, so if you're interested in being a guest on the show, give us a call, send us a message on our Facebook page. We'll see you next week.
The all-new up and running at Newmarket Center is Boone's
Later, guys.
specialty running store. In addition to running gear and running shoes, they have walkers and all-around great supportive shoes. Up and running is